Are you ready to do some spreadable and drippy clay? So we've already previously done pipeable clay. This is the clay that spreads like buttercream, and then the clay that drips down the side of your cake. So what we're going to do is put a cake form together because I didn't have one ready to go. And I'm going to cover this one slightly different for the simple fact that I did not have one ready to cover. So we're going to use some clay that's already in a piping bag, and these are great ways of using up that excess clay. You can see it was a little bit stiffer, so um, look, I'm not going to say that that's definitely pipeable clay. It might have been a little bit softer than that, but in essence, it doesn't really matter. This is just our glue. Instead of using another product, instead of buying another thing, use what you have. Just going to make a thin coat of that. And your spatula that's got the angle at the handle is really handy for doing cakes where you're trying to spread it flat on top because it's that shape that allows you to press down. If you've got one that's just straight without that angle, you cannot spread it as well. Just going to put a little tiny bit of PVA glue on that just to give it a bit more extra tack. Get that nice and smooth. Just making it nice and tacky. Working out which side was, the nastiest side is the one that's going to go down, the best side is the one that will go up. And you can see that bottom one has been knocked around a little bit, so it's going to be hard to get this as perfectly round, but it's not going to be too bad. Once we've got it lined up, we're going to take some skewers, and these ones were actually the perfect height to join these two together. I'm just making a couple of little pilot holes, and in essence I probably can't quite see where some of those went. Just drop those skewers in. Just realign it the best you can. Like I said, it's a bit whoopy on the outside. Some of it won't line up perfectly. And then we're just going to tap those skewers down. You do want those heads to sink in. And I'm just realigning before I put the last two down. I'm just getting that as close to meeting up as I possibly can. Okay, now we're ready to do our cover. And I'm not covering the outside of this with dry foam clay. I'm actually using a piece of glitter foam sheet. The reason I'm doing that is because I wanted a dry surface and I didn't have a cake covered. Now again, I'm just going to use my clay as my glue. Why not, right? Why not use it up? If it's in the bag and it didn't have a project, we were needing to use it up, might as well do it. Now I'm just going to lay this onto a piece of baked paper just simply because it's going to keep my desk a bit cleaner because I want this clay to go all the way to the edge. So I'm using that same spatula that's got the angle at the handle. We're just going to drag this clay completely over our surface and you can see how much is going onto the paper. Let's give it a little spritz just of water. And do you see how easily my knife is now sliding over that surface versus how it was before? Just need to get another little piece of paper here. Now, I did not cut my glitter foam sheet to size before I started. And guess what? I should have. I always like telling you what not to do. Hmm, don't do that. Make sure you cut it to size first because it's going to make it much easier to add that to your cake form. This does not have to be super thick. It's just acting as an adhesive. If you have that cut to size, then make sure that icing goes all the way to the end, obviously. Covers the whole surface. So I had cut it to the width, roughly. I think you want it longer than shorter because you can always cut it off at the top. Like you can always cut it off after it's put together, but you can't add it on. So you do want it slightly wider, but you want that length covered, that length cut, because that will save you mucking around doing what I'm having to do now. And I'm guessing, never good. That's about as good as it's going to get. Now, I guess, as you can see, I've got a little bit of clay, a little bit of clay. I've got a lot of clay on the outside of that. And I guess if you wanted it to blend right in, like, and that you don't have any visibility, use a clay that's pretty much similar to this to the color of your glitter foam sheet. I don't use glitter foam sheet very often, I will confess. Like I said, it's because I wanted something that was dry to put my um, finish on. And I will tell you the reason why. I could have coated the outside with clay, but if I put wet clay on wet clay, you often get a separation line. And then you've got to try and cover it because you can see where the clay's pulled apart and you don't. That does not make for a nice product. So that's the reason I've gone glitter foam sheet. But like I said, I very rarely work with it because I usually always work with clay. And we're just trimming up the top. And this is what I was saying to you before. It's easier to give it a little trim than find out you've cut too short and then be trying to hide a collar that's too short. This cuts really easily. Now, if you've got a lot of dings and dints in the side of your styrofoam, then you are going to see holes, but it's okay. Don't worry about it. So you can see that one had a little bit of a ding, and that's why you could see down a little bit of a separation. We're going in with number 13, which is candy pink. It's got a little tiny bit of dry on the edge. We do not want to mix that in. Just bin that. Take a nice scoop. And I'm going down further into the bag where the clay's really quite wet, nice and soft. Soft clay is the best clay for making it pipeable, making it spreadable, etc. You can see the entry of that bag's a little bit messy. Just take a bit of clay and just dab that, and it just tidies up the edge of that bag because it's those little bits that sit on the edge of the bag that go hard and crusty, and they're the pieces that you want to make sure you keep out of your clay. Adding PVA glue, getting our mixer with our dough hooks, and we're going to mix up our clay and glue in smaller increments of glue adding. Don't add a big heap at once because if you've added too much and it goes too soft, you've got to keep adding clay to get that back to the consistency that you want. And then you end up with a ton of clay that you've mixed up. And then you have to find projects to use it up on. So just add your glue in smaller increments. So that there, I would say, is at about pipeable consistency. It's holding its peaks. You can see as the beater's going around in that bowl, it's holding the shape. You can see the lines, you can see the peaks, and it's holding. So that is like a stiff meringue, what we'd call a stiff meringue, that is going to hold its peaks when you pipe it. We're going past that point. We're now going into a softer consistency that we want to look like buttercream. And just as you say buttercream, you want that buttery type consistency. Again, I'm not adding too much. I'm working that to feel. Now, I'm not trying to aerate this clay. I'm just trying to mix my glue through that mixture. So I'm sort of wiping my dough hooks backwards and forwards through it to see how spreadable it feels. And it still felt a little bit stiff. I want to be able to push my dough hooks through it quite easily. And I want it to feel really like that softer consistency you get when you've made up buttercream. I guess it's a little bit difficult if you're not a baker to give you the right like terminology that might um that you might be able to relate to. So leave me a comment, let me know if you're not a baker. I'll have to come up with some new terminology. So see it's still holding. Can you see that still holding some shape? That's important. Because clay that doesn't hold its shape is going to run. And when you're spreading it, you don't want it to run. You want to spread it, but you want it to stay in place. Again, leave me a comment if you're not quite understanding what I mean. So you can see it's loose, but see it's sort of holding up okay. And now we're just going to spread this onto our cake form. And again, we're going to use that angled spatula because it does make it easier to get nice and flat up against that cake form. It's not so bad if you had a straight spatula on this one, where the steel part goes straight into the handle and doesn't bend like that one does, because you're lifting up that cake form. But whenever you're trying to work on the top of it, you really need the angle. So instead of having two dirty, it was easier just to work with the one. And the other thing that is easier, if you get a bowl that's got a bit of weight in it, so that when you're trying to scoop your clay out of your bowl's not moving around on you. Otherwise, you've got to keep putting your cake form down. So either get a silicone bowl that's got like that sort of stick bottom, or get a heavier bowl that you can sort of one-handed scoop some clay out. All of those things do make a difference. And we're just spreading this on, and this is going to end up with a look that looks like spread buttercream. Remember, when you're decorating a cake or frosting a cake, this is like adding a frosting. When you want that really super smooth finish on your cake, that is often a fondant look where you're covering it with, like they do in the baking world, where they cover it with a marzipan or something. You're covering it with your rolled out clay. So, this look that you're getting here is your buttercream frosted look. The reason I don't work out of my main bowl where I've mixed up my first part of my clay is because any little bits of glitter, any little bits of styrofoam that are coming off onto my spatula and I'm wiping it back into my bowl, I don't want to contaminate that whole full bowl. So I'm trying to keep if there's any left over, if I've kept it nice and clean, then I know I can reuse it and it's not got lumps and bumps in it. I'm adding a skewer to the top because it sort of helps when you go to finish off the top of this cake to give you something to hold on to. Can you see that? Just looks like a frosting, right? Let me know if when you do yours, if you're tempted to lick your fingers because it looks so real. So again, remember you are not going to get a perfect flat matte finish using this technique. If you want that, then you need to do a fondant finish. This is a frosting finish. Just going to spritz it with water. It does help your palette knife to run, palette knife, spatula, to run over the top of this, and you can see that it's smoothing out. But you have to be careful because if, just like that there, if your tool just seems to catch in, you make a big hole. And again, remember the technique that you're doing. You are not going to get that perfectly smooth fondant finish using this technique. You can work this clay to the cows come home. It is not going to give you that look. All I'm doing is smoothing out my clay to a smooth frosted look. Just going to use my palette knife. And I know this is a bit hard for you to see what I'm doing because of the way I'm holding that. And again, this is a good example. I've now scraped my palette knife on the side of my glitter foam sheet and the side of my cut styrofoam or my styrofoam piece, just in case there's any glitter or styrofoam in that. I don't want that going back in my bowl. I'm actually going to waste that bit of clay. And I'm just tidying up my edge. But you can, any edges that are really, really untidy, you can always trim them and you can always sand them, but you cannot sand them until they are like super dry. So again, just put a little bit of water on my table and with a palette knife, and again, see my palette knife's got an angle at the handle. I'm just going to go through and just knock down that ridge that was created when I tidied up the side. And I'm happy enough with that. Just give the table a bit of clean up. I just did that on the table so that you could see the amount of water I was using and just that technique of just dipping it in. Got to have a little clean up with the tools. Now, so we've used spreadable clay on two cakes. One, we did the side, and one, we've spread the top of this cake with the glitter foam sheet collar around the outside of it. We're going to now put this clay back together. This is why we were keeping our bowl so clean, not putting any glitter or any chunks of styrofoam in it. We're just going to put it back in here, mix it up. Add more PVA because that consistency was spreadable. And I think I get to about here and realize the quantity I've got in that bowl and think I don't need that much really drippy clay because I'm going to make this really drippy. I'm taking this to the extreme of the drip to show you. So you're going to adjust this in between. I've shown you how to make the spreadable consistency. I'm showing you how to make the drip. If you don't want yours to drip as much as you see this drip at the end, then you adjust this now. But I looked at that bigger bowl and went, there is just no way I need that much of really drippy clay because really drippy clay is not good for covering anything because it runs so much. So instead of wasting it all, I took a little portion out. Let me know if that makes sense. I'm adding quite a bit of that amount that's in that bowl of PVA. Guys, don't forget to, if you haven't already liked this video, make sure you comment. Make sure you share if you can. That help us to get out there. And of course, make sure you've subscribed and hit that notification bell so that when I do upload a new video, you get notified of it. I'm just throwing a little piece of baked paper over the top of my clay just so that the air doesn't get into it too much. And I will bag that up later to use again at later date. Now have a look at this. Have a look how soft this clay is. Can you see that it is hardly holding any form? It's got soft peaks in there, but it's really not holding peaks at all. And it's actually dripping off my spatula. As I go to load it up, it's actually dripping off. Now, when I get to this stage of loading that bag, I'm like, it's the vessel that I'm loading it into, that wine glass is full. It's not going to take any more. And can you see it is starting to run over the sides? So I just create myself a little bit more room by pushing my bag up so that I can put the rest of this clay into there. But it feels squelchy inside that bag. When you're piping pipeable clay, it's quite firm under your hand. This consistency where it's really quite drippy is squelchy. Can you see how easy that squishes down? And like just how easy my hand pushed into that. Now, I do think it needs to be knotted just to help to stop that popping up the top of the bag. Putting a knot in the bag just keeps it down into that portion and stops it getting super messy because it is so scotchy. And if it's going to sit for a while, the only place the air can get into it is the part where you've cut the bottom. No air is getting in the top of that bag, which will help it to keep better for longer. Now, all depending on how big you want your drip, you can see that's a pretty big hole, which means we're going to get a pretty big drip. And this is super drippy. This is the extreme side of drippy. If you don't want it this drippy, don't add that much clay, that much PVA, sorry. Now you can see I'm just going around the top, and every now and then I'm just dropping down a line, and I will show you in a second. Whoops. Oh my goodness. Well, we know that one's going to go big. Now, the more you tap this, the more you move your project, when your clay's this loose, the more it's going to drip. So you watch this, I'll show you. See where it's sitting? Tap, tap, tapping. So if you don't want it to move much, don't tap, but this clay is just with gravity going to drip. And it ends up really drippy. So adjust the amount of glue. Let me know if this has helped. Do you see that one where I made that boo-boo? It's actually closing up because you're going to find that this clay is going to fall right over the top of this cake. Can you see the way it's moving? Now it does, as it moves, the further it spreads, the thinner it gets, like the layer on the cake. And then you can just with a wet palette knife just tidy up that little bit of top. Leave me a comment, let me know. Was this helpful? Did you enjoy it? Beautiful. Watch how far this is dripped.